Awesome. Okay, here we go.
Hello, and thank you for joining our Black History program as we recognize and honor the many achievements of those who were forged in the fire to fight against the many injustices and inequalities of its time. To the many men and women of color who insisted that they be included in the service of God and country, attaining some of the highest military honors, opening the door for all to participate, we salute you and honor you today. May we never forget.
Thank you, Director DeCohen. We really appreciate that message, and thank you for joining us as you can as you're traveling, and count on her being a part of our future virtual programs that you can join. For our program today, I want to introduce you to our amazing moderator, Dr. Lessie Branch. And I'm going to hand this off to her in just a moment. But I do want to highlight her amazing background in scholarship. Dr. Lessie Branch is a racial equity policy scholar and a Fulbright specialist in race, ethnicity, and religion and politics. She's also a scholar with Scholar Strategy Network and the director of programs, community relations at Citizens Committee for New York City. Her scholarship and practice examine the gulf between Black optimism about group progress and the actual data on continuing disparities, questions of social knowledge, social beliefs, and relative group position through the transformative application of rhetorical criticism to interrogate narratives that structure social practices in ways that privilege some and marginalize others. Dr. Branch is a graduate of Fordham University with a BA in political science and earned her PhD and MPhil in public and urban policy from Milano School of International Affairs, Management, and Urban Policy, as well as an MA in political science from the New School of Social Research. She's also the author of books, articles, and is a frequent speaker, and we are very honored to have her moderating our panel today. And so with that, I hand this program off to Dr. Branch. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kristen, and good afternoon, everyone. We thank you so very much for scheduling us in. We are delighted to have you. And without further ado, I would like for this illustrious panel to introduce themselves to you. And as I call your name, please introduce yourselves. I'm going to start off with Colonel Stephanie Dawson.
Good afternoon. It's certainly my pleasure to be on this distinguished panel and also to be able to have a conversation about Black History Month and the contributions and challenges of African Americans who served valiantly for their country. A brief summary of my background is, or actually not summary, highlights, is that my service in the military culminated with being the first African-American woman, actually the first woman to serve as a brigade commander in the New York Army National Guard. Prior to that, and the significance of that is not only being that first brigade commander, but having the distinguishing factor that it was the 369th Sustainment Brigade that I commanded. It was a newly formed brigade that had one commander prior to me. But what was unique is that the 369th Infantry Regiment was a unit that distinguished itself in World War I during segregated times in the military. And because they were given to the French, their exploits, including receiving the Croix de Guerre, which is the French highest honor, could not be overlooked. Another highlight is that I served as the commander of the 27th Rear Area Operations Center, AKA the 27th Course Support Center. That was another unique position because number one, it was branch immaterial. Number two, within New York State, there had never been another female commander, nor had there been a logistician. Although the position was branch immaterial, I was selected and did not work with logisticians, and there was only one or two logisticians in that unit. That was the unit that I deployed with overseas in 2003 in support of Iraqi freedom. Prior to that, I had a number of traditional positions that I had, which helped lay the underpinning for ultimately becoming that brigade commander, and then finally having oversight for multiple brigades within the state for a short period of time. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Colonel. I'm going to now ask Commissioner Hendon to provide us with his bio.
Hey, thank you so much, Dr. Branch. Also to, Director DeCohen, and also to Kristen over at New York State DVS, we thank you for putting this discussion together. As was mentioned, my name is James Hendon. I serve as Commissioner for the New York City Department of Veteran Services. Military affiliation for me, as I active duty in the Army, an infantry officer from 2002 to 2009. I've been in the reserves ever since. So currently I'm a commander of a logistics battalion based in Fort Knox, Kentucky. And I'm just so happy to be a part of the discussion today.
Thank you so very much, Commissioner. I'm going to hop to Venecia.
Hi, everyone. I am honored and privileged to be sitting amongst these panelists today, and thank you for everybody who has joined us. As Leslie said, my name is Venecia DeRoose. I'm currently an MSW student, graduating in May. Exciting. And I'm also a Navy veteran. I served in 2006 to 2013. As a mechanic, so as a support equipment technician. So I worked on all the heavy gear, and my experiences in the military was being a woman within a mainly male structured environment in a mechanic field. So that's where most of my experiences come from. Currently, I've served. So when I got out of the military in 2013, I've always served in veteran-specific roles. So I was a peer support manager for a local veteran agency, helping veterans connect with resources within the communities under the Dwyer program. So I worked under the Onondaga County as well as Broome County, managing that program out there in Binghamton. And I also served as, in that capacity, I was able to connect with many of the agencies that are veteran affiliated. I currently sit as the, on the Veteran Mental Health Training Initiative through the NASW for New York State, advocating for veterans and educating clinicians about veteran culture, military culture, so that they are more educating in how to deal and work with veterans and some of the issues that we may have or deal with, or some of the strengths that sometimes is not identified. So that's where most of my advocacy stems from. But I am a school social worker, so I also enjoy that as well. But I do want to still stay in the veteran advocacy role, and I'm able to do that through the NASW Veteran Mental Health Training Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Venecia. And then our final panelist, CEO Jeremy Butler.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm Jeremy Butler, also Navy, joined back in '99 as a surface warfare officer, served on active duty through 2005 and am still in the reserves today. But back in about 2015, came on the staff of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, which is primarily known for its national advocacy work. We do a lot of work in Washington, D.C. and around the country to advocate on behalf of post 9/11 generation of veterans, but oftentimes it expands well beyond that. For instance, right now, one of our bigger pushes around toxic exposure and burn pits, which affects not just the post 9/11 generation, but the legislation we're really fighting for now goes back to 1991 in the first Gulf War, since I think we all are familiar with the fact that toxic exposures are not limited just to burn pits and things like that. So it's been great being with IAVA for now nearly 7 years, about 3 years, running the organization. In addition to advocacy, we just try and raise awareness around the country about issues that veterans are facing. And then we also do have a direct support program called the Quick Reaction Force that folks can reach out to any veteran, any family member, any era, any discharge status. If you need help connecting with the VA, if you're unhappy with the VA, whatever it is, we can help you. And I'll drop a link in there for you for that for more information. But honored to be part of this panel. I'm looking forward to the Q&A.
So thank you so much, Jeremy. And just one thing that Venecia sparked in my own mind, I served from 1982 to 86, and I went in undesignated, spent some time in Mississippi working with a trainer at the fighter pilot training, VT7. After that, I chose to become an optical repair man and was stationed in Virginia working with submarines. I was on the submarine tender, the USS Emory S. Land. And what Venecia sparked in my mind is the billet that she served in. And part of the reason I chose to become, to work with submarine periscopes and other visual and navigational equipment was because most of the female designated, if you will, jobs in the military, you couldn't make rank. And so if, you know, for those of you who have been in the military, you kind of know that you can't stay in a rank but so long before you are bounced. So what I did was went in the other direction. I looked at all of the things that I could possibly do, and I specifically chose a career that wasn't dominated by females because number one, you would be able to make rank much quicker. And by making rank, you also earn pay raises. And so there was some strategy there for me, similar, it seems, to what Venecia did in terms of choosing the career path. And so for today's discussion, we are, of course, celebrating Black military excellence. We are celebrating military excellence overall. And the panel is going to explore the gaps that Black veterans continue to face as they serve with excellence and distinction, and what we can do to bridge those gaps. I'm a firm believer that when there's a challenge, you have to go all the way to the margins in order to fix it. And then when you go to the margins and you sweep back to the center, you are able to then help everyone who has been marginalized. And so having framed the discussion, I'm going to start out with my first question to each of the panelists, and you should feel free to, answer it however it is that you see fit. So thank you for telling us who you are. Now tell us how you show up for and celebrate and support veterans in general, and Black veterans in particular. So I'm gonna reverse course, and I'm gonna start with Jeremy this time.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. And I guess I'll make it very personal for me. So, I mean, it's changed a little bit in full honesty. As I said in my intro, I've been with IAVA for about 7 years, 3 years as CEO. And for me personally, it was a bit of a mindset shift away from the way I kind of handled myself in the military when I was in uniform, where I kind of wanted to not raise the fact that I was a Black man. I just wanted to be another officer out there getting the job done. But then as CEO, especially as so much of the country had a racial awakening 2 years ago with the murder of George Floyd, it was really very clear that as the CEO of this national organization, I had a platform to begin doing more, speaking out more, and being more honest and transparent about the varying needs in not just the Black community, but other minority communities, especially within the veteran community. So a lot of it was putting aside, in full honesty, my fear that I might alienate some funders or I might alienate some members by speaking more openly about some of the injustices that we see, not just within the veteran community, but within the military, within the Department of Defense, and within the country, and feeling more comfortable speaking about them openly and being very clear and transparent that when we're helping all veterans, we're helping all veterans. I think I said that badly. When we're helping minority veterans, you're helping all veterans ultimately. You're making the system better. When you make a VA more responsive to minority veteran needs, you're ultimately improving the healthcare for every veteran that comes through that door. So it was a little bit of getting pushed in the right direction, and I'm glad that it happened for me personally, because I think we all benefit when larger veterans organizations can start feeling more comfortable and realizing that when they focus on the needs of women veterans, when they focus on the needs of minority veterans, that it is in the benefit not just of the veteran community, but frankly of the country.
Thank you for that. Venecia, weigh in on that if you would.
So my perspective is being able to talk to both veterans and non-veterans, because everybody needs to be educated about veteran culture and some of the challenges that are faced. So I'm able to do that. As I said, I'm in my graduate degree, my last semester, and in my class, I'm the only minority in my class, because I live in upstate New York, so there aren't a lot of minorities that live in my area. So I use that as a platform to communicate that information. We have open discussions about race and what are some of the challenges and what we see. Some of my classmates are from Syracuse, which is more, there's more minorities in where they live, and a lot of times they don't see it from that perspective. So I think having open discussions about veteran issues, Black veteran issues, just Black issues in general, helps educate everybody who's around. And also, I am able to educate clinicians as well in the Veteran Mental Health Training Initiative. We do panels, and we've done panels about military culture. We've done BIPOC panels. And the goal of that is to educate clinicians about, some of the challenges that veterans have faced while in the military and outside of the military. However, in my work as a veteran, my role is specifically, I focus on women veterans because there's a huge disparity there. But also all veterans, the challenges that Black veterans face is the same challenge that, in my opinion, other veterans face. So in rural communities, accessing services, knowing about services, navigating services, where do I go? I feel the challenges have been similar in the areas that I have worked in upstate New York. It's about educating, outreach, and just knowing where to go when you need support and help.
Thank you so much for that. Commissioner, please weigh in on that. Tell us how you show up for and celebrate and support veterans in general and Black veterans in particular.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so, I guess, Dr. Branch, I want to echo some of the things that when I listened to Jeremy, I listened to Valencia, to their responses. A lot of it was, we do what we can to be right by all of these veterans, knowing that the rising tide lifts all boats. And I can say a little bit of that too, as far as, we do what we can at the New York City Department of Veteran Services to help veterans on issues ranging from healthcare to housing to benefits, culture, employment, education. So we try to do it in that way. To answer this just as James, as a person, not necessarily through the perch I'm on. First one for me is do the best job I can so I can still be here when things emerge where I can be of value to people who look like me. So first one, I got to survive as far as the day job with the commissioner work and what it entails. Another piece is to tie in with other people of color who do this kind of work across the country. You know, there's a group of us who are in veteran service entities at the government side of things, and often are not government, who get together every couple of weeks, just get on a Zoom call, just talk and try to share best practices to make sure that we're not missing anything, any blind spots that we can be aware of. And another one is to do what I can to try to champion programs that I know will be of value to Black and brown people. We try and help all veterans, to be clear, but it's in my mind. I'll give you an example. Army JROTC is looking to expand for the first time in decades, meaning that there'll be more programs where the federal government will help pay for the JROTC program. We've been pushing to get a few more of those programs here in this city, in certain high crime areas where people who look like us have been victims, and in some cases perpetrators, of violent crime. And so this is kind of a way where I take this identity of being Veteran Services Commissioner and this other identity of, I'm a Black man in America, and I see things I want to do right as we keep moving on with enough to try to make some changes. Another one that I know Jeremy's pretty aware of, and some other people know. I've been adamant about trying to add co-ops to the VA home loan program. Half of all co-ops in America, in New York City. This is near and dear to me. What motivates me with that, because all veterans will benefit and get it across the finish line, is knowing the history of redlining in this country and how many people who look like us were not allowed to take advantage of certain benefits. I was reading an article the other day. It was like 1.2 million Black soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines who fought in World War II came home and couldn't use their GI Bill benefits. We're not allowed to use them specifically for home purchases. Something like less than 10 Black people who were in the military who came back to Mississippi could even use the GI Bill to buy a home, as an example. And so, the co-op work will help everyone, but I'm motivated by it when I look at certain aspects of the history, when I look in the mirror as a Black man in this country. And so, that's kind of how I try to handle the double consciousness of doing this work while being African American.
That is, that's a fantastic answer. And sadly, what we're seeing in New York City and probably other, parts of the state, but, most prevalent in New York City, is what happens when folks are displaced and are not in community. If people could just have stable housing and communities that are properly resourced, in the social sciences, we never try to prove causality, but there is correlation. And if people are housed properly and can live in communities that are properly resourced, we could, definitely stem the tide of a lot of the dysfunction that we are seeing. So definitely thanks for touching on that. And now I'm going
I just want to say something real quick now, and I'll be quiet. I'm sorry, I know we got to run a show. You're hitting some chicken and egg stuff when you say that, between housing, because it's the housing issue. You got to also talk about employment, between underemployment and unemployment, and what we do to be right on that for all people, but including, those veterans of color. So I just wanted to say that, but I agree with you completely.
And, and I appreciated that. And I actually just did an op-ed earlier this year that focused on 3 things that Eric Adams and the incoming city council should focus on in the early parts of their administration that could really stem the tide, right? So definitely employment, but all of this boils down to the racial wealth gap. But, maybe we can have another conversation and a panel about that. I want to jump now to Colonel Stephanie Dawson to weigh in on how you show up and celebrate and support veterans in general and Black veterans in particular. You're on mute.
At the end of the day, unlike the other panelists, I started out in the National Guard in North Carolina. I joined on the buddy system with my cousin, and I come from a long lineage of family members who joined the military. And I was already a college graduate when I joined. And I was enlisted briefly before going to Officer Candidate School. The reason I give that background is to say I was always both a soldier and a citizen. And in my jobs in the civilian world, and I quickly became a manager, whether it was delivering election services, banking services. I was the operations manager early on. I was always in a position to hire veterans. And I was not specifically looking to hire veterans. I was hiring the best people for the job. And I understood the military and the applicability of those skills that were learned in the military and could be applied to, health and welfare and housing in New York City. So most of my time was here in New York City. One of the things that's especially noteworthy is that I ultimately became the chief operating officer at the Port Authority, hiring people who had been logisticians like me. So under me were people who were working at seaports, airports, tunnels, bridges, rail systems, all skills that I learned in the military. So I always bridged those two worlds together. And I was always conscious of focusing on the needs and supporting African Americans in the military, particularly women, because I felt that we had, as an African American female, I had the dual challenge of being African American and also being a female. And in certain respects at that time, which was late 70s, early 80s, the challenge of being a woman might even have been a little more severe. So I had those two advantages or strikes, depending on how you look at it. And I had to be careful to make it clear that I understood big picture and was looking at all the things that would make my civilian world run smoothly, while simultaneously making sure that those best candidates, and many of them tended to be African American, were selected for those positions. The second piece that's really instructive is about the telling of history with regards to our contributions. And so one of the ways that I've always shown up was pointing out the contributions of African Americans and women. And when that story is not told, people think that we're just joining the game, and we're not. The unit that I was the commander of last was the 369th. They were notorious in serving in World War I, as I mentioned earlier, and their fighting days on the Musagon offensive helped to turn the tide. So when given opportunity, I like to talk about those contributions, and also to make the point that focusing on our contributions does not take away from the contributions of others. But we have to look at it as one big giant tapestry. And if we don't color in our contributions, the quilt that's being delivered, or that tapestry that's being developed, is actually not as colorful as it should be, and also doesn't properly represent all the mixture that makes it so beautiful. So those are the 2 points that I'd like to make. And then the third one is health disparities are significant in both the African American community, and particularly their unique disparities of African American women. As we tell that story, and I was previously the president of the National Association of Black Military Women, who accept the charge of making sure that they tell the story of our contributions. The picture in back of my screen is of the 6888 Central Postal Directory, which was an all African American, all female unit. The fact that it was segregated, because it was segregated times, was arguably a negative, because they had to deal with things that other units didn't have to deal with when they were deployed overseas for World War II. But at the same time, it gave them the platform for excellence, because they were able to bring all those strengths that they possessed to the forefront, and they succeeded against the odds. This monument makes a statement, which I just like to read because I think it's instructive when I talk about the National Association of Black Military Women, is that as the president at the time, we did significant fundraising, because those ladies at the time that a monument was dedicated to them were already very senior in years. And the fundraising that the National Association of Black Military Women, who struggle with their own finances, but took on the challenge of fundraising to help when the monument was being dedicated, is as follows. As president, I wrote on the monument, or for display on the monument on the legacy panel, that we advocate for African-American military women to tell her story. The accomplishments and challenges often absent from history books. It is well that the 688 Central Directory Battalion's extraordinary legacy will now be known to all, inspiring future generations. That is part of our challenge, to make sure our contributions are known so that that can be leveraged to inspire upcoming youth. That's kind of a long-winded story, but I thought I just had to cover all of that.
So I definitely appreciate that history lesson. Thank you for that. And to some of the points that you made with regard to the duality of your identity, Kimberly Crenshaw refers to that as intersectionality. I believe it is her. And so we all live at the intersection of something, right? We're never just one thing only. We are spouses, we are employees, we are sisters, we are brothers, cousins, nephews. And so the challenge is to juggle all of that. And it shouldn't be a binary, I am this or I am that. We are all of these things. And I think when we have narratives floating out there, or when narratives are framed in such ways that don't celebrate intersectionality, is when we see a lot of the challenges that veterans experience. And then because Black veterans are at the intersectionality of their Blackness and then their veteran status, and then throw in their gender, stuff just goes left really quick sometimes. So my next question for the panel is, what are some systems, right? So some of us alluded to the redlining system that, probably is still very much in operation today in this country, right? We talk about World War I and World War II. We don't even have to go back that far in history to see that redlining still does exist. What are some of the other systems that lead to disparate outcomes for veterans in general, but Black veterans in particular? And I'm going to mix up the order a little bit. I'm going to start with V, and then I will call on the next person.
So this one was a challenging one for me, because I see that some of the issues that are have been spoken about downstate is still different from upstate. But I did notice that IVMF, which is a Syracuse University, which is specific to veterans and their family members, they did a research project in 2020, and they talked about some of the issues that Black veterans face, and one of them was employment. And connecting with resources, so those that are in the rural areas. And I think some of the things that may lead to Black veterans not being able to connect to resources is just that it's not available, you know, especially in the rural areas here. And, you know, how do they get connected to these resources? I mean, these are still questions that need to be answered. How do we do that? How do we connect them to, you know, the services that they need? And I think it goes back to the boots on ground type of approach. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, in regards to peer support, do Black veterans just feel like they don't have a voice and they need someone to advocate for them? That can be very true. And I have seen that in my personal view. With the veterans, the Black veterans that I've worked with, even with women veterans, they don't consider themselves to be a woman veteran. They don't consider themselves to be a veteran, and they just don't identify. So, so with Black veterans and women veterans, I feel like sometimes they don't think that they have a voice, and people don't listen. They don't know who to go to. They don't know how to advocate for themselves. And this is true in, you know, in individuals who are oppressed or marginalized.
Thank you for that. And just want to raise up something that was announced, I want to say yesterday, and it's to the credit of the governor. So Governor Hochul announced 400 years of African American History Commission appointments. And in watching her speak about this on the news, she said something that was very poignant. You know, you have to tell all of the narratives. You can't just tell one side of it, right? And one of my late spiritual advisors, who was an Air Force veteran, would always say, half a truth is a whole lie, right? So you gotta tell the whole story. What we have to be able to do in this country is to hold all of the narratives in our hands and then reconcile them. And it doesn't mean necessarily that because one narrative from one perspective is less truthful than another. They are all true, and we just have to learn to reconcile them. And you know, if the shoe doesn't fit, don't squeeze into it. If the shoe fits, but it hurts, say ouch, and you know, make some changes. So thank you for that. I'm going to now move to James and ask you, what are some of the systems that you see that lead to disparate outcomes for Black veterans?
I think that, you know, one is, and I know this is ongoing right now, as far as really digging into disparities and how the VA accounts for Black veterans, or, you know, people of color who go and put the disability claims in, as far as, you know, what a rating is for this person who's a person of color versus this person who's majority, you know, those differences there, or even the differences in how the process is administered for folks who look like us. And even the idea of what's going on with what is rejected and certain things are appealed. And that's, I understand there's a watchdog probe that's underway where we should hear some results from that this year. Something that was initiated to just look at the VA in depth on it. But I just want to call that out when you talk about one thing about Black veterans. Another one I have to mention is the system that we are in, being in America. I'll tell you the story. I spoke with a veteran when I was at a supportive housing, you know, site not long ago. And he talked about, you know, growing up in a rough neighborhood. You know, he's coming out of Brownsville, out of Brooklyn. And, you know, he was on a certain trajectory in life, went in the Marine Corps, was in the Marines for about 17 years, gets out of the Marines, comes back home, gets right back on the same glide path he'd originally been on. And so this is a larger question of what we do to, you know, for those men and women who are coming for a better opportunity, for it to be an enduring opportunity, and not just while you were in the service, everything was good. How do we equip you to have the tools to be all right once you leave? and beyond. And so I think that's something we've got to kind of call out when we look at like systemic issues. And those just two. I can keep going on some things, but when I think about, you know, some of the problems we're dealing with systemically, it's the VA as far as how it's handling it. Oh yeah, one other one that I'm so happy we do this here in New York State is, you know, roughly 15% of all veterans has a less than honorable discharge. Disproportionately, those numbers go to people who look like us, so folks who were kicked out for either being a member of the LGBTQ community or being African American at a certain time in our nation's history. And I'm so happy with what Director Cohen is doing, and with all the rest of the team there at New York State DVS with the Restoration of Honor Act. In other words, to give a venue, a forum for our folks who were kicked out or given bad paper for the wrong reasons, to make sure that you are recognized in every way we can here in New York State. So yeah.
Yes, bad paper. That definitely has long-lasting, lingering negative outcomes. And so I'm glad to see that at the state level, they are trying to do something about it. And what is interesting to me about that, and being a racial policy scholar and a public policy scholar, generally people who are marginalized look to the federal government to implement policy that creates, that bridges gaps for state sanctioned marginalization. So for example, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, even though discrimination was state sanctioned and the norm beginning at the federal level, it was the federal government through some, nudging, if you will, that maybe saw the error of their ways, or maybe just saw that their time on this route had come, and so they had to find another route, if you will, to do what it is that they wanted to do. What I love so much about what you just said is that it is now at the state level, not the federal level, that the state and the city in some instances are trying to to right the wrongs, if you will, of that have happened at the federal level. So I'm very pleased to hear about that, and hopefully the efforts from those, the outcomes from those efforts will be fruitful, and people who are suffering needlessly because they got bad paper, the effects of that will hopefully begin to shift. So thank you for that. All right, I'm gonna hop over to Jeremy with regard to that question about systems and that lead to disparate treatment.
Yeah, thank you. James touched on one of the biggest that I was going to say, and the overall framework of what I was going to get at is that I think that there's some of the systems that are unique to the military veteran space, and then there are some systems that are unique to, maybe not unique, but are present throughout American society. And the part about bad paper discharges and things like that were one of them that I was going to say that's unique to the military, and it's driven obviously by when you're on active duty. The GAO came out with a report not too long ago showing that it was specific to the Air Force that African American airmen definitely received higher, more punitive results on punishments than their white counterparts. And obviously that leads to negative outcomes when you're talking about potentially bad paper discharges and things like that, which then spiral downward to not having access to the VA benefits that you're entitled to, which is also then gets to the bigger system that was mentioned earlier around the GI Bill and things like that, which was that if you go back to the founding of the GI Bill and many of the ways in which Congress set up the system, it wasn't to rule out nearly as many of the service members as the VA currently does. I'm not going to try and remember the exact level of discharge where they said the cutoff was, but the idea coming off of World War II was that, hey, if you served, unless you did something really bad, you've already earned your benefits. You should get the GI Bill. You should be able to go to school. You should be able to qualify for housing. And we're not going to make it as punitive as the VA currently interprets that system. And so that's one of the things that we're talking about that definitely has a negative outcome. Then on the more not unique to the military are things like healthcare, where you see African Americans oftentimes doubted by physicians and medical personnel when they go in to talk about, hey, you know, I'm feeling pain with this, that, or the other, or something like that. And it exists within the VA where there's a greater chance that you are going to be doubted by your physicians if something is truly happening to you. So you might not get treated for that pain. You know, I know that, you know, I certainly can't speak personally, but I know women face this oftentimes at a much higher rate than men too, where there's just doubt amongst the medical community as to what you're feeling. So I think there are systems oftentimes that are not written down, but that are present within and without the military veteran system that lead to a lot of these disparities. And I just want to bring it full circle because someone, I think it was Venecia, who mentioned that a lot of the issues facing minority veterans are similar to the issues facing the larger veteran space. And that's what we have seen from our quick reaction force, very similar things. And we were tracking last year, we had the largest number that came to our quick reaction force for support. It was over 4,000. And if you look at non-white versus white veterans reaching out for support, the reasons were almost always the same. And I'm just looking over my paper here. It was the vast majority was financial, like 50 to 55%. Housing was second at around 20%. Employment was third. And so the same reasons that folks are coming, veterans that are looking for help are often the same. I think the difference is in how are they getting helped when they are reaching out for help, or more specifically, how are they not oftentimes getting help when they reach out for help?
Thank you for that, Jeremy. And then Colonel, can we get you in on that, that question?
I'd like to echo what's already been said, but a slightly different twist. I mean, Jeremy and James in particular covered the issues that I had wanted to talk about, but I think that if we need to take it back to the womb in terms of when military into the military system, and they're tracked sometimes into career fields that aren't, while essential to the military, and we have to do our military job, at some point we need to transition to those roles and jobs that will bear fruit in the civilian world. Because at the end of the day, if you are promoted at a lower level, or the skill sets that you develop are not really marketable or needed in the civilian world, you're going to be underemployed. Two, you're going to be subject to what everybody calls unconscious bias, where people look at you and think you can only do the heavy lifting jobs, as opposed to those more senior jobs where the knowledge, the intellectual knowledge that we've gained is what will get us into those higher paying jobs. Even, and if you're underemployed, you're going to have housing challenges. You know, it sort of ripples. And so if we start at the beginning and say, one, that is a major system that tracks us into those lower paying fields that don't promote you as fast and don't have as much value for civilians, because every military person, for the most part, is going to be both a military person, a veteran, and then they're going to be a civilian. And so we need to make sure that those systems are aligned so that they're getting the groundedness, if you will, and exposure that will be essential in those civilian jobs, so that they're not underemployed, so that they're not just competing for subsidized housing. They're able to get the you know, different types of housing that might be available to the community at large, and certainly veterans should be able to compete for that as well. The other point that I think was made had to do with overall how we avail ourselves to the educational and other benefits that are available. Quiet as it's kept, a lot of the military people, I mean, the African Americans that go into the military are better educated than their non-African American counterparts. And so we're already at a higher level of education, if you will. And it's really, how do you translate that into promotions and civilian viability, so that we're not at the bottom of the food chain when we exit the military stovepipe.
So I definitely appreciate that answer, and just all sorts of sparks going off in my head. I remember being a young, person in the Navy, and fraternization, and I use that term very broadly, was frowned upon, right? You were not supposed to be friends with an officer if you were an enlisted. But the way I have lived my life, even from a young age, has always been to seek out people who are where I want to be, or seek out people who I can learn something from. And I have, and I keep in touch with her now, even to this day. She was at the time a young lieutenant. I was probably an E3 or something like that. And I would just sit with her, pick her brain. I took her to be a mentor. And I think, those are some systems that we kind of need to create, even if it means we create them in a way, not that is clandestine, but is sort of off the grid. Because they, systems don't want us to know anything, right? Systems are working the way they are supposed to, by the way, I just want to add that. But then there are subsystems, right? We, I think, as a people, have always benefited from subsystems. Harriet Tubman, anyone, right? How about, there are some others that come to mind, but I think it's just so important with the wealth of knowledge that is sitting on this panel. My hope is that, we are taking under our wings young folks, and maybe even not so young folks, because I'm, you see all of this silver in my crown. I have a mentor, right? I'm knocking on 60's door, and I have a mentor because I've not arrived. I don't think that I know everything. And there are still things out there that people can share. So my next question is, what have you or your organization done to bring about systems change and to bridge some of those gaps? And I'm going to start this time with the commissioner.
Make sure I'm not muted. Okay. As far as to bring about systems change, for us, it's how we approach the job. As far as how do we try to, just be out in front of our people and help them on issues that involve whatever they're dealing with. So to me, the systems change piece is, I guess, setting up a stronger feedback loop. We have on our website an Ask the Commissioner pay a portion where people just send questions in, and it's just a great check on us so that we can be decent with knowing if there's any issues where one person's not being treated with the same equity as another on some way, shape, or form. It's a direct shot to me on that. And so I think from a system standpoint, just trying my best to cover our blind spots, which is there anything we're not doing right with people? So from a system standpoint with how we function, that's one thing that comes to mind. Also from a system standpoint, and please stop me if I'm off, Leslie, while I'm taking this question, it's how do we show up for our people? How do we make sure that we are showing up in a way where we are not not ignoring an entire chunk of our veterans? 28% of the veterans in New York City are Black. That's 210,808 people, about 28% are African-American. And, prior to coming in this job, there'd been a lot of things I'd heard before even being in this job about us not being as present with, our minority groups, with our different groups like National Association of Black Military Women, with our Montfort Point Marines, with Dory Miller, post as far as VSOs, just with not being where we needed to be. And so I think on a system side, it's been conscious of where are we presenting ourselves so that we can be able to impact as many people as possible. And just one other one I mentioned too, on the system side, it's small, but it's big to me. we're always telling people who we are as far as our culture, because I believe that if I understand who you are and what your compass is, then everything else is gravy. And so I think for us, it's making sure folks know what our values are, the things that we hold dear. And by knowing those things, you're quicker to say, all right, look, I think I can deal with them on this, or I can come to them on that. Because so much of this work in the veteran services space on the government side is having a relationship, is a man or woman feeling comfortable coming to us and sharing whatever they're going through with us. And so we've got to be very clear and just open about who we are to make ourselves more inviting. I don't know if that kind of answered the question, but yeah.
So I appreciate that answer. And yes, thank you. All right, gonna hop back to Colonel for this. What are some things that you or your organization have done to bring about systems change and to bridge some of those gaps? Unmute.
Yeah, please excuse me, but there's a little one here and I keep muting myself so that I don't distract people and then I forget. But one of the things you alluded to, you talked about it, you didn't name it, but was mentorship and sponsorship.
Mm-hmm.
And the organizations that I belong to do those both, because we have to both formally and informally mentor military and veterans. And then again, we also have to be sponsors. See, sponsors can do something about what they see.
Yeah.
And every day, the larger community does something for people that they know, whether they know them from the golf course or the, football club or the bridge club or whatever. They are in a position to help people, and they do. And I think, and there's nothing unethical or wrong with that. And I think we need to be conscious of the fact that sponsorship in that way is good, and it can help break those chains of events where our people are underserved or not recognized or not getting the services that they need. So that's number one. The second thing is alignment. So one of the things that when I was the president of NABMW that I did was I reinforced that we need our own mission, which in our case is advocating for and supporting herstory, but also we need to be aligned with not only like organizations, but those that are not so like, but that could be good partners. And I think that is actually pivotal. So for example, in our case, we are aligned with the National Council of Negro Women. We are aligned with sororities, fraternities, organizations that are just about women, that are just about people in a particular space, logistics. And we marry those things together, and therefore under our umbrella of coordination and collaboration, we have partners who we can bring to the table when either there's a fight or when we want to sponsor something. The next thing that I would talk about is the importance of scholarships, not only for veterans, but for veteran families. So one of the things that NABMW does is that we also give scholarships to veterans. We give scholarships to those who are not veterans, but are family members, because we want them to be in a position where they can support their family members that are veterans, or they ultimately might become veterans. But in any event, the society at a large is enhanced by giving those scholarships. And scholarships can be modest. We give out modest scholarships as well as larger scholarships, because those small scholarships, guess what? They cover books. You don't have to always be given something large enough to ease the tuition payment.
Right.
Books are important, clothing, food, things to wear to proms. All of those things are important when you deal with the total community. And I think organizations need to be aware that we cannot be lone eagles. we have to be part of the community, and we need to leverage relationships with other organizations to support their missions and our mission in small m as well as the larger mission.
I appreciate that so very much. You know, because in this country, there's this narrative of bootstrap and do it on your own and stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with, you know, personal and individual responsibility. But any group that has ever gotten anywhere has done it collectively. And so I'm glad to hear you raise up the narrative of collective action, togetherness. There's the African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So I'm so happy to hear you say that. Gonna jump now to V for that question. What is it that you or your organization are doing to bring about systems change and to bridge some of the gaps that we're discussing?
I think, Colonel, you mentioned one of mine in regards to networking and collaboration, potential being and collectively. I think you have more of a chance of getting things done. So I truly appreciate that. I also think that being an individual, I like to look at it from a micro level initially. So just being a person. So for me, as a social worker, I have a lot more, a lot of voice. As someone who's a Black veteran who always felt like their voice is not being heard. So I can be that voice for that person and help bring about those type of changes. And I have been working as a peer support manager in Binghamton and being able to manage a program and having the power to do that, because sometimes it does help. We were able to bring change, and part of that, what we initially did was do outreach. So we were literally in the community connecting with individuals and also bringing in the local government because they saw the impact that the PAIR program can have, which made them advocate for funding to be able to do those things in the community, because there was a definite need for Black Americans as well as for veterans on the whole, and women veterans. We were able to get additional funding. So being able to collaborate and do things together definitely enable us to do more. The other thing that I had was how important in the rural communities, again, upstate is very rural, very sparse. How are we getting the word out to the veterans? How are we getting the word out to the electoral government? How are we doing that? And what we've done is we've literally, again, I like to look at it from a micro level, being in the community and setting up tables or doing a launch, bringing people out and educating them and just letting them know what resources are out there for them, and bringing people together. Because a lot of times veterans don't want to ask for help, even though they may need it. So just knowing that they have individuals out there that are able to help them and are able to connect them and are able and have similar values or have similar needs and be able to connect with these individuals while in their own communities where they feel safe and comfortable is necessary in order to bring about any type of systems change.
Thank you for that, V. Definitely appreciate it. You got to meet people where they're at. Have to, that's so important. And then finally, gonna head to Jeremy on this one. What are you and or your organization doing to usher in systems change and bridge some of these gaps?
Thanks. I'll be pretty quick on this because I think most of the things have really been said, but I do want to emphasize what has previously been said because I think it's one of the most important things. And that's what we try and do. And that's partnering and helping and working collaboratively with other groups, especially smaller, newer veterans groups that are often focused on marginalized corners of the veterans community that maybe are representing groups that have previously been overlooked by some of the larger veterans groups, working with them to raise awareness of issues that are important to them, making sure they've got a seat at the table. You know, when IAVA was up and coming, we were often sort of had some pushback from some of the more traditional veterans groups who didn't necessarily want us getting in at their spaces, especially when it comes to testifying before the House and Senate Veterans Affairs committees and things like that. And it's been really incredible to see how that's changed over the years. Not only that we're there, but you know, this is what's happening next week. IAVA and many other groups are testifying before the House and the Senate VA committees. And that used to be reserved for really just the big six, you know, the traditional organizations. And now it's 20-some organizations representing every flavor of veterans groups that's in the country, all getting to talk directly to members of Congress about what their priorities are. And the more we work together, and I don't mean just we as an IAVA, but all veterans groups really work together to say, hey, they're the ones leading on this issue, but it's important to us too. And we're going to defer to them to talk about that issue. The more we can do that, I think the more we can do to elevate the entire veteran community in this country.
So I appreciate this. And this has just been an excellent discussion, if I might say so myself. And we're a little bit, it looks like we're a quarter past the hour, and we're wrapping up at 1:30. So I definitely want to, if we can, maybe open it up to some Q&A from our attendees to see if we can get some engagement in that way. And I just want to thank all of the panelists who have thought it not robbery to come out and to, you know, be part of this collective. And it has been my honor to, you know, be your moderator and to engage with you. So thanks.
So if our attendees would like to, so there's a feature where you can raise your hand, and then I can bring you in as to ask a question, or you can type your question in the Q&A there. I see that you know, if Commissioner Hendon could just just speak briefly to that answer that you just gave regarding, I know in New York City, I mean, in our entire state, but in New York City in particular, housing is definitely a top concern of veterans. And so Commissioner Hendon, if you could just speak to that question and answer that you just hit on the Q&A there.
Yeah, the question was about affordable housing. As far as it's, you know, you had a man run for governor not long ago, said the rent is too high. And so it was really about, you know, what are we doing about these high rents and how do we help veterans try to get through this? And the answer that I mentioned was reach out to us. First off, you know, our phone number, anybody who needs to call it, is 212-416-5250. The number for DVS is 212-416-5250. Email address is connect@veterans.nyc.gov. It's connect@veterans.nyc.gov. We've got people on staff who are housing navigators, who help you with Housing Connect, with Mitchell Lama Connect. Other thing we've been doing lately is looking at all of the properties that have price points that are equal to or less than the numbers you see in Housing Connect. And so that's something we've been doing separately. As you said, looking at 421As, having a VA work study, just go and look and see who is out here who may see them on Housing Connect, where they have some units on Housing Connect where you've got to go through that gauntlet to get the lottery for it, but they have units that are not Housing Connect that are also at an equal or lesser price. There's situations like this. We call them Goldilocks situations. We've been making the point to go look for them. So when veterans come to us saying, hey, I'm looking for something, we can say, hey, we'll help you get through Housing Connect, the Mitchell Lama Connect. And oh, by the way, here are some units we found where the price point is in a good place, and you may not need to go through that entire lottery. So do what you can so you can get through a lottery, but the same building has some other units that are open market where they're at a certain price point. So we try to help folks in this way. I also put on the website, in the chat, 2 places you can look online just to get to learn more about this. nyc.gov/vethousing. It's an overall landing page for housing issues. It's nyc.gov/vethousing. The other one, we call it a housing ladder. wherever you are on the housing journey, you can find a tab there and see if there's anything out there you can be able to take advantage of resource-wise. And that's nyc.gov/vetladder. It's nyc.gov/vetladder. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Hendon. And so Pamela Harris, I'm going to bring you in, Pamela, so that you can ask a question. There we go.
I'm on.
Go ahead, Pamela. We can hear you.
Okay. Hi. Commissioner, you just hit it right on the nose with the housing situation. But my situation is, okay, I'm a disabled vet, 100% trying to find somewhere to buy. I was trying to buy a condo. And remember you mentioned the co-op. That would have exactly been easier for me. Also, I've been called twice or 3 times for a Housing Connect because I'm doing all of this. But I'll also notice on there, it depends on how much you get in disability and your pension. So a lot of times my pension, it doesn't reach. It's like when they get to like the 80, they skip over me because I need a 1-bedroom, not a co-op. I mean a studio. I'm a Desert Storm vet. I can't sit in there in a studio.
Pamela, I want to walk this back. You're looking to own or you're looking at rent? Which one are you thinking about?
I want both. I want either one. Either one, whichever one I can afford in New York City. I'm born and raised in Brooklyn. I just wonder why we can't come back and go back to our neighborhood and be able to afford to live there.
You reach out to us, let's talk offline and figure this out because we've got, we're doing everything we can to try to do what we can on this. And to be clear, rents are skyrocketing all over the country. I just want to say that. The housing crisis all over the country. But Pamela, reach out so we can do as far as helping you one-on-one on this one, because that's the thing we've been cultivating more, is having people in-house who can just work with you on this to see what's out there. And I don't want to get ahead of anything, but I think we can be able to work with you in a good way. But please reach out to us. Like I said, I know Kristen put the email and all that in the chat. The phone number also, it's 212-416-5250. But yeah, no, I've got some ideas. We'll be able to help. Just reach out, please.
And I'm in this awful old building. It sounds like my neighbors are walking up and down in my apartment. And it starts 2 a.m. in the morning and ends at 7 a.m. It's awful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Can I throw something out there? Is all right, Kristen and Leslie? I just want to say something, just not directly with Pamela, but it ties all of us. You mentioned systems. We are so happy with the leadership from Mama Viv and the people of the state so that we have a better handle on who our veterans are. There have been lots of talks with the Department of Defense lately, and the folks from New York State DVS have been at that table pushing it so we can know who our people are. Because for every Pamela out there, you've got another 3 people who aren't even really active in the tribe. And so we're trying to get this data from the Defense Department so we can better serve folks, because it's so much deeper than just us, And so I just wanted to mention that as far as a system piece, where if I know Stephanie, Jeremy, Kristen, V, et cetera, we can help them all the more. And so we're trying to just get that piece of it. I just wanted to say that. Sorry.
Thank you, Pamela, for stepping up with your question and for sharing about your personal situation. It's so important to hear the voices of veterans who are in it and who are looking for the right answer. And it's such a powerful question of why can't I come home? Why can't I come home and live in the neighborhood where I was born and raised? And because that gets to veterans benefits and what's been promised to veterans, and it also gets at equity issues about how are we living, how are communities doing across our city, across our state. And so thank you for raising that important issue. Thank you, Commissioner Hendon, for addressing that. And please, if any of our other attendees here, if you want to raise your hand like Pamela did, I can bring you in to answer your question or to ask your question. But I also just want to say what a powerful conversation this has been and how much I've learned today. Thank you. Dr. Branch for, for guiding, this conversation and really getting at some of the difficult issues. And also I want to say to all of you, thank you for your service in the military. And thank you for all that you have done to continue serving veterans, to continue serving our communities, and for living a life of service and involvement and engagement in what our nation has been and what our nation is becoming. And also, Colonel Dawson has to hear this every time that she's present in public with me. I was proudly one of her soldiers in the 369th as a Harlem Hellfighter. I was at her change of command ceremony where she stood up as the first woman to command the 369th. And I'm so proud to have shared just that moment in the history of a storied unit and the history of our city and of our state. And I'm so proud of the service of all of you, of all that IAVA is doing, all that you've done, V, it's this, and all that's been happening in New York City with veteran services, which has been just so incredibly, just the progress has been just unbelievable to watch. And no process is perfect, but so many more veterans are getting services now than were in the past. And that's the name of the game. It comes down to helping people on an individual level and changing lives, changing systems. And it all starts with us talking to each other and being aware of what people have experienced, what we all have different lived experiences, and just to hear the different perspectives that each of you have is so powerful. So again, as we sort of reach our end time here, we do have a few more minutes if somebody wants to chime in with a question. I'm looking for your raised hands. I am eager to.
There was a question in the chat about the VA caregiver program that I'm happy to address.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy. That's perfect.
Thanks. Yeah, it was, and very quickly for everyone, the VA caregiver program was a pilot program stood up by the VA a few years ago. I don't remember exactly when, but basically the idea was if you were a disabled veteran who needed assistance living with your day-to-day functions, rather than having to hire an outsider, you could the VA would pay your spouse to do so. So basically funding the spouse to do the types of home health care needs that some severely disabled veterans needed. It was a pilot program, turned out to be very successful. It was limited only to post 9/11 veterans. It was like, as I said, it was a pilot program, but turned out, one, to be very successful, but also then there was a lot of uproar from pre-9/11 veterans who were rightly saying, hey, we would love to take part in this. My Vietnam era spouse who I've been taking care of for years, why can't I get some money for this? And so the VA realized, one, hey, the program's working, two, we need to expand it. So what they did recently is they ended the pilot program, expanded the program to all veterans, but if you had been in the pilot, you had to reapply under the new program. And what is happening right now is a lot of caregivers who had been approved under the pilot program are getting denied under this new program. And Quill Lawrence at NPR is doing a lot of reporting on it. He recently has pressed Secretary McDonough at the VA to do some follow-up questions and things like that. I don't want to speak for Secretary McDonough, but I heard the exchange, and what my takeaway was basically, I think, is that the VA has been surprised that folks have been getting denied, and they're looking into it. They're trying to understand why that's happening. That was not the intent of the program. It was not as if when they redid the program, it was to make the criteria harder. So I think there's some surprise within the VA. The reporting has been helpful for the VA to realize that there's an issue, and now the VA is trying to figure out why it's happening and how it can be fixed. So there's not a satisfactory answer right now other than stand by and let's see what happens. And I give Secretary McDonough a lot of credit for his ability to weigh in on these things and to directly engage. And so I do think he's going to follow through on that and hopefully come to a good resolution where this program can successfully be expanded to all veterans, and those that have been denied, hopefully the system will come back around and fix it so that they can still be taken care of and be a part of the program.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jeremy. I wasn't aware of just that latest that latest exchange that you mentioned with Secretary McDonough. So like that's really enlightening. Really appreciate that. So Stephen Epps, I'm going to bring you in to ask your question. So go ahead, Stephen, and unmute yourself. You should have no issues with unmuting yourself there and asking your question.
I'm sorry. Can
Okay.
you hear me now? Oh, yes. First, I'd like to say hello to Colonel Dawson. She's a member of my VFW post, Proctor Hobson, and we're very proud of her. So, hey, Colonel. Commissioner Hendon, we met before, but I've got a member of my post. He's a Vietnam vet, a Marine, and he was severely wounded over in Vietnam. Now he's suffering with a situation with his wife. She's got severe dementia, and he's got major health problems, and he's hanging in there. He's going to the VA. He's gone there several times, and they just keep putting him off. He needs help with his wife. Is there anything that DVS can do to possibly help this man get some help? He can't get aides in there. They had given him one for about 2 hours a day, 2 days a week, or something like that. That's no good for him. He can't do anything. And his health is deteriorating because he can't get any help. Is there any place that he can reach out to in DVS that might be able to assist him?
Stephen, thanks for the question. Have him call. Please have him or you call. Let's just follow up so we can just tie in. Because I feel like this is one we have to look at it and say, okay, is there anything we can do on the VA side and talk to folks at VHA for whatever they can do as far as the Marine on his identity, and that we can't promise, we just advocate. But on the other side with her, it's what else is out there that we can leverage by being a city agency? Is there anything in the Department for the Aging in its kit bag or that it can access that we can say, okay, this can be some other way for us to assist here. We need some more details so we can then go fight the fight. But for us, one step will be to talk to the folks at VHA here. Another step will be to go, and that's for him. Another step will be for her, what is out here at the city level that we can be able to tap into. So just please, hit us up offline. And thank you so much for bringing this up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I really appreciate you stepping in to bring up that really important situation. Again, like we're reaching our end time. I want to say thank you to everybody who took time out of their day and chose to spend it with us. And I am so grateful to Dr. Branch, to all of our panelists for sharing all of their experience, their insights, and just excellent comments and insights and answers with us today. Truly appreciate it. Again, if we at the New York State Division of Veterans Services can help you, please get in touch with us. And we want to serve you. If you live in New York City, please get in touch with Commissioner Hendon's agency, New York City DVS. We're the dueling DVSs of New York State, so we hope to cover everybody. And we really appreciate you being part of our first Black History Month virtual event. And stay tuned for an email from us on a recording of this event and how you can access it, and stay tuned for more events coming up in the future. Thank you all, and with that, we'll conclude this presentation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Too.